So the future of learning is managing minds. This was a prediction of two well-respected authors at the start of this year, Stephen J. Gill and David Griebo, in a piece they wrote entitled, "The Future of Learning is Not Training." Now, I'm sure that's about as unwelcome an opening to a speech you have ever heard at an STF conference. But please bear with me. I'm not in any way meaning to be scaremongering or disparaging about the future of our industry. But I am sure that everyone sitting here will agree that we are living in a very different world from just a few years ago, never mind 10 or 20 years ago. Now, let me ask you all a question. What do the following jobs all have in common? So we have a mobile app developer, a wind farm engineer, a cloud services manager, a chief storyteller. I actually know the chief storyteller at Microsoft. He started on the same day I did, so what went wrong for me, I don't know. And also a chief listener. Now, the answer, of course, to this is that none of these jobs existed 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago in some cases. And of course, we could similarly list a whole bunch of roles that we would have trained people for in many different situations over the years, jobs which no longer exist today. SQA is here today because we absolutely know and understand that for us, it's not enough to generate a bunch of qualification certificates on paper, and for these to be the only currency between the employers, the universities, the colleges, training providers, and the individual learner. We know that qualifications are still important and will continue to be important, and of course, the quality and the integrity of these qualifications will always be a critical factor. But they are only one element of a much bigger picture. There are now so many sources of information about a person's qualities, abilities, experience, track record, performance. Just look at Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, digital badges. There are so many other things as well that you can look at. So we need to figure out what is the relationship between qualifications and certification and these other sources of information and proof of learning. There's a real need for all of us to think differently about what each of us do as organisations and how we work better together to meet the needs of learners and employers. Now's the time for each one of us to focus on why we do what we do and not just on what we do. And this will really help us to respond more effectively to the changes which are happening. Now, going back to that earlier article I mentioned by Gill and Griebo, they're talking in the article about mobile learning, about micro-learning, they're talking about social learning, and about how learning apps are now ubiquitous. And they're also talking about gamification being available for everything, and they're absolutely correct about that. Let me share a personal example of this with you. I'm on the board of a technology business, and about 18 months or so ago, we acquired a company who build mobile apps and apps for the Internet of Things, for the various devices that can sit and be used on the Internet. That company is currently working with a major global pharmaceutical player to gamify how they run their clinical trials for the treatments of Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and other conditions which affect the motor skills in the body. A mobile phone, the one that we probably all have with us at the moment, can now measure the level of tremor in a person's hand, or their ability of their fingers, or the dexterity of their fingers to pinch specific spots on a screen, all as part of a game. Now, it used to be that a very large percentage of the participants of a clinical trial of that type would last no more than 10 or 11 days in the trial, and then they would just give up, they'd get fed up, or so on. The gamification apps have extended this to well over 30 days, thereby allowing so much more data to be collected, which in turn better informs their scientists and their researchers about the treatments, about how they develop the treatments and the drugs to treat these conditions. Now, I appreciate this is not specifically anything to do with learning and training, but the point is here, no area, no industry, no profession will be untouched by the blistering pace of new technology coming into our lives. Let's face it, every one of our lives has already changed over the last 5 years as a result of how technology has evolved on a personal level. Even at the most basic of levels, a few years ago, the fact that my then 82-year-old father could speak to his dying sister in Chicago over Skype just a few weeks before she passed away was an immense, huge step for their generation. It doesn't sound that impressive nowadays, given some of the technological developments that have happened since then, but it was such a significant thing for them. At a personal level, we have all embraced the technological changes, and in fact, arguably, we're crying out for more of them to make our lives simpler, more convenient, and in many cases, more enjoyable. When this happens at a population level and a society level, it doesn't matter what industry you are in. You simply have to raise your game and think differently. And so this is the challenge for all of us here at this conference. People who resist change or ignore the factors that are disrupting their industries or their businesses are often accused of looking through the wrong end of the telescope. Now that may seem a bit harsh, but if I go back again to the Gill and Grebo paper and what they said, and I quote from this, "We know from experience that change is hard. We tend to grab onto the past and use it to design the future. And that is a profound failure of imagination. Sometimes there needs to be a disruptive idea that lights up the crystal ball and makes us all look at the future in a new way." Now, obviously, this is not all going to happen at once, and of course, there will be a place for organisations who can both deliver training for the new skills which are required for the new jobs and the new careers which have emerged and are going to continue to emerge, as well as for the increased skills needed for the jobs which exist today, because they're evolving and developing all of the time, and the needs and the demands on people in those jobs are changing. And I hope that SQA will continue to support you in all of these activities. But we must be tuned into what's coming next. It's up to us to disrupt the market before someone else disrupts it for us. It may not even be an existing player in our marketplace who does it. So the challenge is there for each of us to think differently. We are operating in a changing world with a new and a different generation of learners coming through who do things differently. We need to do things differently also.